That picture killed something inside me in the first 3 seconds. My son, my only son, stood on the deck of a Mediterranean cruise ship, a glass of champagne raised high, grinning like he'd just conquered the world. Beside him was his wife, Chloe, sun-kissed and draped in silk, the sea sparkling behind them like a postcard from someone else's life. The caption read, "Blessed life." 8 days earlier, I had wired them $13,000, every penny I'd saved for the Italy trip my late husband and I had planned for years. Ryan had called me in tears saying Chloe was in danger, that men were threatening her over gambling debts. I didn't hesitate. I canceled my tour, told myself there would be other chances to see Rome and Florence, that saving my son's family mattered more than any dream vacation. Now I sat at my kitchen table in Seattle, the glow of the phone screen cutting through the dim light like a knife. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it. Each new photo was another Blow Lobster dinners matching resort robes, Chloe flashing a diamond bracelet that could have paid my monthly bills for a year. My heart hammered in my chest, rage, disbelief, and something colder, heavier. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in filters and hashtags. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I just stared, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was an old picture. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. But the timestamp glared at me, posted that morning. 8 days. That's how long it took for my sacrifice to become their vacation fund. People think betrayal screams, but it doesn't. It whispers, "You fool." I set the phone down, palms sweating, and stared out the window at the gray February sky. Somewhere across the ocean, my son was raising a glass bought with my trust. To understand how I became the woman willing to make her own son pay back every cent you need to know what happened before that picture appeared. I've been a teacher for 40 years. 40 years of early mornings report cards and saving every extra dollar in a jar labeled Italy. My husband Frank and I used to talk about that trip like it was our reward for a life of responsibility. Florence for the art, Rome for the history, and the Amalfi Coast for the sunsets. We never made it. Cancer took him before retirement ever came. After he passed, the dream didn't die, it just got lonelier. I told myself that one day I'd still go for both of us. So I kept saving, cutting coupons, tutoring after school, stacking small sacrifices until they became something solid. By 66, I finally had enough flights, booked hotels, confirmed a new camera still in the box. For the first time in years, I felt like life might be waiting for me instead of passing me by. Then Ryan and Chloe came for dinner. She looked effortlessly perfect as always, smooth hair, manicured nails, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ryan kept glancing at her before speaking like every sentence needed approval. Over dessert, Chloe said, "Italy sounds wonderful, Linda, but are you sure it's safe to travel alone? The world isn't what it used to be." Ryan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Mom, maybe postpone it a year. You could come visit us in California instead. Family time would mean more." It stung hearing my own son doubt me, but I brushed it off. They meant well, I thought. They were just protective. A week later, my phone rang before sunrise. Ryan's voice was trembling. "Mom, it's bad. Chloe got mixed up with some guys she's been gambling online and they're threatening her. They said they'll hurt her if we don't pay." I sat up in bed, heart pounding. "What are you talking about, gambling? How much do they want?" $13,000. I know it's a lot, but they're serious. "Mom, I'm scared." And just like that, logic drowned beneath fear. My boy, my baby, sounded terrified. I didn't ask for proof, didn't question the details. I just whispered, "I'll take care of it." By noon, I'd transferred every cent from my Italy fund into his account. Then I called the travel agent, voice shaking as I canceled the trip. There were penalties, of course. I told myself it didn't matter. Family was more important than Florence, wasn't it? I folded up the itinerary, slipped it into the same drawer as Frank's wedding ring, and told myself I'd go next year. That night, as I sat alone with a glass of wine, I imagined Chloe hiding in their house, terrified, and Ryan doing everything he could to protect her. Pride mixed with grief, I'd given up my dream, but at least I'd done it for love. What I didn't know was that at that very moment they were planning their cruise. I wasn't saving a life. I was funding their second honeymoon. A week after that phone call, Marianne showed up at my door with a bottle of red wine and her detective face on. We'd taught side by side for 2 decades, and she'd seen me through every heartbreak since Frank's passing. "You've been quiet," she said, slipping past me like she always did. "That means either you're writing a memoir or something's wrong." I didn't answer. Instead, I handed her my phone. The cruise photos were still open. Marianne scrolled in silence, her eyebrows rising higher with each image: Ryan in a tuxedo, Chloe in a flowing white dress, sunsets and champagne flutes, everything tagged. She's spontaneous, vacation and living our best life. When she reached the end, she poured herself a generous glass of wine. "Well," she said finally, "I guess we found out where your Italy money went." Something inside me cracked. The first feeling wasn't rage. It was disbelief, the kind that keeps you frozen while the world tilts. Then came the nausea, then the sting of humiliation. I'd been a fool. I, the woman who could spot a forged homework signature from across the classroom, hadn't recognized a con when it came from my own blood. For 2 nights I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Frank's face on our wedding day, that shy grin of his, and wondered what he'd say if he knew. Probably something gentle like, "You wanted to believe the best, Lynn." That was always my problem, believing the best. By the 3rd morning, belief turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to know everything. I called the bank first. The young man on the line was polite, too polite, as he confirmed there had been multiple recent transactions on my credit card, about $4,000 in flights and cruise expenses. "But I never used that card," I said, gripping the phone. "It's my emergency card." He hesitated. "Ma'am, the charges were made online with the correct billing zip and security code." After hanging up, I sat there, shaking. Only one person besides me had ever held that card last Christmas, when Chloe offered to pay for dinner, and I handed it to her while I ran to the restroom. I remembered how she'd joked about the waiter being slow, how she'd kept my wallet a little too long. Marianne came over that evening, notebook in hand. When I told her what I'd discovered, she didn't gasp. She smirked teacher style. "You taught honesty for 40 years, Lynn. Maybe it's time to teach your final lesson." We spent the next 3 hours building what we called the family crime file. Screenshots of Chloe's posts, printouts of every transaction, copies of bank statements, even the timestamps that showed the cruise tickets had been bought days before Ryan's panicked phone call. Each new piece of evidence stripped away another layer of denial. My son hadn't made a mistake. He'd participated. Whether he'd planned it or just gone along, I didn't know yet, but I would. At one point, Marianne reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I'm not broken either." We spread the papers out across my dining table like a battle map. There was a grim satisfaction in organizing the details, dates, amounts, motives. I'd graded thousands of essays in my life, but this was the first time I was marking someone for betrayal. By midnight, the file was complete. I looked at it and felt something shift inside me. The grief had burned away, leaving steel behind. Frank used to tell me I had a quiet kind of strength, the kind that didn't show until pushed too far. Well, I'd been pushed. I gathered the papers into a neat folder, sealed it, and whispered to myself, "No more tears. They're going to remember this day for the rest of their lives." Sunday evening, the air still smelled like jet fuel and cheap sunscreen when their car pulled into the driveway across the street. From my window, I watched Ryan carry the luggage inside tan lines, still fresh on his neck. Chloe was laughing, radiant, her phone already raised to snap a photo of the sunset. My sunset. The one they'd bought with my stolen savings. I waited 30 minutes, long enough for them to unpack, to start believing they'd gotten away with it. Then I slipped the folder of documents under my arm, straightened my cardigan, and crossed the street. When Ryan opened the door, surprise flickered across his face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to welcome you home," I said pleasantly. "And I'm just so relieved Chloe survived that terrifying run-in with her loan sharks. You look positively glowing, dear." The color drained from her face. Ryan blinked hard, trying to collect himself. "Mom, can we?" But I was already stepping inside. No, let's sit. I brought something to show you both. I spread the photos across their coffee table, first screenshots of every cruise post, every smiling lie. Then came the credit card statements, bank transfers, and finally the timeline I'd compiled with Marianne. Silence settled over the room like smoke. Ryan stared at the papers, shoulders slumping. Chloe crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. "You have money, Linda, more than you'll ever spend. Why be so stingy?" I looked up, meeting her eyes. "No, Chloe. This isn't stinginess. It's tuition for your final lesson." I opened the manila envelope and slid a new document toward them, a legal agreement drawn up by Marianne's nephew, who happened to be a lawyer. A promissory note for $17,437. You'll repay it in 2 years. Miss one payment, and I file for elder financial abuse. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. Chloe snatched the paper, scanning the terms. Her voice rose. "This is insane. You're ruining our lives over money that's going to be ours anyway when you—" She stopped, but too late. What I asked. Quietly. "When you die," she blurted. "It's not like you're immortal, Linda. We just accelerated the timeline." For a moment, even the ticking clock on the mantel seemed to pause. Ryan turned toward her, horrified. "Chloe, what the hell did you just say?" I took a deep breath, pulled out another envelope, and placed it beside the first. "I'm glad you mentioned that I said evenly, because this morning I updated my will." Ryan reached for it with shaking hands, scanning the pages. His face paled. "You left. Everything to a scholarship fund. Yes. The Frank Carter Memorial Scholarship. For your children and any future grandchildren. Education, not cruises. You'll still receive $50,000, enough to remind you that integrity pays better than theft." Chloe's composure cracked. "You can't do this. We're your family. I am doing this because you're my family," I said, rising from the couch, "so you'll never again confuse love with entitlement." Ryan sat silent, eyes wet but unblinking, the kind of silence that happens when shame finally lands. Chloe kept ranting, her words dissolving into noise I no longer needed to hear. I gathered my papers, slid them neatly back into the folder, and walked to the door. On my porch, Marianne was waiting with 2 glasses and that knowing smile of hers. "How'd it go?" I handed her the empty envelope. "Better than expected. The lesson's been delivered." She raised her glass. "To justice and self-respect." I clinked mine against hers. "To consequences," I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. 3 months later, I sat at a tiny cafe tucked between 2 old stone buildings in Florence. The air was warm and tasted faintly of roasted tomatoes and dreams that had taken too long to come true. The terracotta rooftops glowed under a honey-colored sky, and the Duomo's shadow stretched across the cobblestones like a quiet guardian. I lifted a glass of Chianti, bought quite poetically with the first repayment from Ryan and Chloe's debt, and let it catch the last light of day. The wine was bold and honest like truth after a long silence. The waiter brought me a plate of handmade pasta fragrant with truffles. I smiled, remembering how Frank used to joke that I could turn any meal into a lesson. If he could see me now sipping wine in the city we'd only dreamed about, I think he'd say, "Took you long enough, Lynn, but I'm proud of you." My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Ryan. "Mom, I signed the divorce papers today. I'm sorry for everything." I stared at it, my heart folding in on itself, then opening again. Slowly, I typed back, "Live like the man you want to become. The rest, my forgiveness, will come when you've forgiven yourself." I set the phone down beside my glass. The ache of loss was still there, but it had softened, shaped now into something almost peaceful. I looked around, the laughter of strangers, the glow of street lamps flickering to life, and realized this was the life I'd been too afraid to claim. For so many years, I began my voice quiet but steady. I believed that being a mother meant endless giving, that love without limits was the purest kind. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. It turns devotion into debt. I didn't lose my son. I found myself again. the sun slipped lower, painting everything in gold. Women, no matter our age, have the right to hold on to our dreams, to say no when we need to, and to live the rest of our lives on our own terms. It's never too late to begin again. I raised my glass toward the sunset. If you've ever been taken advantage of, remember you are not weak. You only need one brave moment to take your power back. Then, with a small smile, I added, "Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe every woman deserves respect, freedom, and the chance to start over, follow Real Her Stories. Share this video, leave your thoughts below, and tell us your own story. Together we'll keep rewriting our lives one honest chapter at a time.